Marcus Chun stood at the edge of the great assembly hall, feeling very small. The Kepler Prime space station was enormous, bigger than most cities on Earth. But it was not the size that made him feel small. It was the beings around him. 847 different alien species filled the massive room. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others crawled on dozens of tiny legs. Some floated in the air with no legs at all. A few were so strange that Marcus could not even tell which end was their head. Marcus was here as Earth representative. It was a big honor, but also scary. Humans had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. Most of these aliens had been doing it for thousands of years. Some had been traveling space since before humans learned to make fire. The other species called humans a junior species. It was not meant as an insult, but it felt like one. It meant humans were new, young, and did not know much about how the galaxy worked. Most aliens thought humans were too emotional and made bad decisions too quickly. Marcus wore his best diplomatic uniform, but he still felt out of place. The alien representatives wore robes, armor, or nothing at all. Some had technology that made them glow. Others had machines that followed them around like pets. The meeting today was about something important. Some species wanted to take over star systems where smaller, weaker species lived. They said it was for the greater good. The strong would protect the weak, they claimed. But Marcus knew what it really meant. The strong would control the weak. At the center of the great hall sat Queen Vexthara of the Zephyrian Empire. She was beautiful in a way that made Marcus' brain hurt to look at. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from inside. Her eyes were large and completely black. She had no hair, but patterns of light moved across her skull like living tattoos. The Zephyrians controlled 1/4 of all known space. They were telepathic, which meant they could read minds and talk to each other without speaking. They had been alive for millions of years as a species. Queen Vexthara herself was over 3,000 years old. No one argued with the Zephyrians, ever. The Queen's voice came into everyone's head at the same time. She did not use her mouth to speak. Her thoughts just appeared in their minds like their own thoughts, but different. The proposal is simple, her mental voice said. Smaller species cannot govern themselves properly. They fight wars, destroy their planets, and waste resources. The strong must guide them. Many alien representatives nodded their heads or made whatever gesture their species used to agree. A few species tried to speak against the idea, but they were nervous and did not say much. Marcus felt his chest get tight. This was wrong. He had studied the smaller species the Queen talked about. Yes, some had problems, but they were trying to solve them. They did not need to be conquered and controlled. He looked around the room. No one was going to speak up. They were all too afraid of Queen Vexthara and her empire. Marcus took a deep breath and stood up. "I disagree," he said out loud. The entire hall went quiet. 847 species stopped whatever they were doing and stared at him. Some made noises of shock. Others seemed afraid for him. Queen Vexthara turned her black eyes toward Marcus. He felt her mind touches, like cold fingers looking through his thoughts. But Marcus did not back down. "You disagree?" The Queen's mental voice seemed surprised. No one had disagreed with her in a very long time. "Yes," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "These smaller species are not children who need to be controlled. They are people with their own rights." Rights? The Queen's mental voice carried confusion. The concept did not translate well to species that thought as groups. Instead of individuals, Marcus walked closer to the center of the room. Every step felt dangerous. Every thinking being has the right to choose their own path, even if they make mistakes, even if they do things differently than you would. And if their mistakes harm others? The Queen asked. Her mental voice was getting colder. Then we help them find better ways. We do not take away their choice. Marcus was fully in the center now, standing just a few meters from the most powerful being in the galaxy. Growth comes from learning, not from being controlled. Queen Vexthara stood up from her throne. She was tall, much taller than Marcus. The patterns on her head moved faster, swirling like a storm. "You speak of concepts your species barely understands," she said. "Humans have been in space for mere moments. You have fought wars on your own planet. You have destroyed parts of your own world. And you lecture me about wisdom?" Marcus felt her mind pushing against his, trying to make him afraid, trying to make him back down. But something strange happened. Instead of becoming scared, he became more sure of himself. "Yes, we have made mistakes," he said. "Big ones. Terrible ones. But we learned from them. We chose to do better. That choice, that ability to change, to grow, to become something better than what we were, that is what makes life worth living." The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could feel her mind touching his deeper, looking at his memories. She saw his childhood on Earth. She saw humans learning to work together. She saw them reaching for the stars not to conquer, but to explore. She saw them making friends with the first aliens they met, even when those aliens were strange and scary. "Interesting," she said finally. Marcus waited. He could feel the attention of hundreds of alien minds focused on him. Some were curious. Some were worried. A few seemed angry that a human dared to challenge the Queen. "You show no fear," Queen Vexthara said. "Even though you know I could destroy your entire species with a thought." "I am afraid," Marcus admitted. "But some things are more important than fear, like standing up for what is right." The Queen studied him for another long moment. The patterns on her head moved in ways Marcus had never seen before. Around the room, other Zephyrians made small noises of confusion. "Most intriguing," the Queen said finally. Then she smiled, showing teeth that were perfectly white but slightly too sharp. "Perhaps this discussion is not over." Marcus nodded and walked back to his place. But he could feel that something had changed. The Queen's black eyes followed him as he moved. And for the first time in the recorded history of galactic politics, Queen Vexthara looked interested in another being. The meeting ended soon after, but Marcus could not shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. 3 days had passed since Marcus challenged Queen Vexthara in front of the entire Galactic Assembly. He had not slept well since then. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered her black gaze studying him like he was some kind of puzzle she wanted to solve. The other human diplomats were worried about him. Ambassador Rodriguez had pulled him aside twice to ask if he was feeling all right. Even the aliens seemed to look at him differently now. Some with respect, others with concern, as if he might be sick in the head. Marcus was walking through one of the station's gardens when his communicator buzzed. The message was simple, but made his blood run cold. "All species representatives report to the main assembly hall immediately. By order of Queen Vexthara." The garden was filled with plants from hundreds of different worlds. Some looked almost like earth flowers, while others moved on their own or glowed with strange colors. But Marcus barely noticed them as he hurried toward the assembly hall. When he arrived, the massive room was buzzing with nervous energy. Representatives whispered to each other in dozens of languages. Even the telepathic species seemed agitated, their mental conversations creating a low hum that everyone could feel. Queen Vexthara stood at the center of the room, but she looked different. The patterns on her head were brighter and moved faster than Marcus had ever seen. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing and shifting with each movement. Behind her stood a dozen other Zephyrians, all high-ranking nobles by the look of their elaborate clothing. They looked confused and worried, which was strange because Zephyrians rarely showed emotion. "Beings of the galaxy," Queen Vexthara's mental voice filled everyone's minds at once. It was stronger than usual, carrying a weight that made some of the smaller aliens step backward. I have called you here to witness something that has never happened before in the history of our people. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Something in her mental voice was different, more formal, like she was about to announce something very important. The Queen's black eyes scanned the room until they found Marcus. When their gazes met, he felt her mind touches again, but this time it was gentle, almost warm. 3 rotations ago, I was challenged by a being who dared to speak truth to power. This being showed no fear when facing the might of the Zephyrian Empire. This being spoke of concepts that my people had forgotten: choice, growth, the right to make mistakes and learn from them. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Many representatives looked around, trying to figure out who she was talking about. But Marcus already knew, and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. I have looked into this being's mind, the Queen continued. I have seen something that exists in no other species we have encountered. Something my people call the fire of creation, the spark that drives all evolution, all growth, all positive change in the universe. The murmurs grew louder, even the Zephyrian nobles behind the Queen were making soft sounds of surprise. The fire of creation was something from their oldest legends, not something that actually existed. This being possesses what we thought was myth: adaptive consciousness, the ability to change, to grow, to see beyond the limitations of one's own experience, to truly understand others who are completely different. Queen Vexthara began walking toward Marcus. Each step she took seemed to echo through the massive hall. Even though her feet made no sound on the smooth floor, Marcus wanted to run, but his feet felt frozen to the ground. Every alien eye in the room was on him now. He could feel their thoughts, confusion, curiosity, fear, and in some cases, anger. The Queen stopped just in front of him. Up close, he could see that the patterns on her head were not just moving, they were dancing. The other Zephyrians were making sounds he had never heard before, like singing, but inside their minds. Marcus Chen of Earth, Queen Vexthara said, speaking out loud for the first time since he had known her. Her voice was beautiful, like music made of crystal and starlight. You have shown me something I thought was lost forever. Hope for something better than what we are. She raised her hands, and suddenly Marcus could not move at all. But it was not frightening. It felt like being wrapped in warm light. I perform before you all the Kythic, the royal claiming ritual that has not been used for 10,000 years, the Queen announced. The Zephyrian nobles behind her began making louder sounds, some of protest, others of shock. Marcus felt the Queen's mind merge with his for a moment. He saw flashes of her memories, thousands of years of ruling, of making decisions that affected trillions of lives, of being completely alone because no one could understand the burden she carried. I claim Marcus Chen as my consort emperor and co-ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, she declared, her mental voice now broadcasting to every corner of known space, reaching every planet, every station, every ship. He shall rule beside me as an equal, for he possesses what our empire needs: the wisdom to know when change is necessary and the courage to make it happen. The silence that followed was absolute, not just in the assembly hall, but Marcus somehow knew it extended across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings had just received the Queen's declaration. The most powerful ruler in known space had just claimed a human as her equal. Marcus found his voice first. Your Majesty, I don't understand. The Queen smiled at him, and for the first time, her expression looked genuinely happy. You will. Your species thinks differently than any we have met. Where others see only what is, you see what could be. Where others accept limitations, you find ways around them. She turned to address the stunned assembly. The galaxy faces challenges that cannot be solved by force or tradition. They require new thinking, new approaches. Humanity offers this. One of the Zephyrian nobles stepped forward, his mental voice sharp with disapproval. "My queen, this is madness. To elevate a species so young, so unpredictable, is exactly what we need." Queen Vexthara cut him off. "We have grown stagnant, comfortable with our power, but blind to our limitations. This human sees what we cannot." Marcus finally found the strength to speak again. "Your Majesty, I am honored, but I'm just one person. I cannot represent my entire species." "You already do," she replied. "Every choice you make, every word you speak, shows us what humanity truly is. And what you are is extraordinary." Around the room, representatives were starting to recover from their shock. Some were frantically sending messages to their home worlds. Others were talking in urgent whispers. A few looked angry. The Queen's mental voice addressed them all. "The claiming is done. Marcus Chen is now co-emperor of the Zephyrian Empire. Any who wish to challenge this decision may do so according to ancient law." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He was no longer just Earth's representative. He was suddenly one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And from the looks on some faces around the room, not everyone was happy about it. "This changes everything," whispered Ambassador Rodriguez, who had managed to make his way close to Marcus. He was right. The galaxy had just learned that humans were not the junior species everyone thought they were. At least, not according to the most ancient and powerful empire in known space. But as Marcus looked around at the shocked faces, the angry expressions, and the few who seemed hopeful, he realized something else. This was just the beginning. Queen Vexthara had just declared that humanity mattered on a galactic scale. Now he had to prove she was right. The Queen stepped closer to him, her mental voice now private, speaking only to his mind. "Are you ready to help me change the galaxy?" "Marcus Chun?" Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of Earth, of humanity, of all the species watching them right now. "I hope so, Your Majesty. I really hope so." The galaxy had gone insane. Marcus sat in his new quarters aboard Queen Vexthara's flagship, reading report after report of what was happening across known space. The communication systems were overloaded with messages flying between worlds. Some star systems had declared emergency sessions. Others had gone into complete communication blackout. It had been 1 week since the Queen's declaration, and Marcus was still trying to understand what had happened to his life. His quarters were bigger than most houses on Earth. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that showed the stars outside, but also displayed information when he needed it. Everything responded to his thoughts, which still felt strange and wonderful. A soft chime told him someone was coming to see him. The door, which was more like a wall of light than anything solid, faded away to reveal Queen Vexthara. She was wearing simpler robes today, and the patterns on her head moved slowly, which Marcus had learned meant she was relaxed. "How are you adjusting?" she asked, settling into a chair that formed itself out of the floor when she approached. "It is a lot to take in," Marcus admitted. "I never expected to be reading reports about entire civilizations questioning everything they thought they knew about humans." The Queen made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Corvani Republic has declared that your claiming proves humans are a secret advanced species that has been hiding their true nature. The Hegemony Coalition thinks it is an elaborate insult to their intelligence." Marcus set down the datapad he was reading. "And what do the Zephyrian nobles think?" "Half think I have lost my mind," Vexthara said honestly. "The other half think I am playing some game they do not understand yet." She leaned forward. "But they are all wrong." "Then tell me what this is really about," Marcus said. "You keep talking about this fire of creation, about humans being different. But I still do not understand what you see that others do not. Queen Vexthara was quiet for a moment, her black eyes studying him. Let me show you something. She touched his forehead gently, and suddenly Marcus was seeing through her eyes. But these were memories from long ago. He saw a young Zephyrian civilization, just beginning to explore space. They were curious, eager to learn, quick to change and grow. But as centuries passed, they became more set in their ways. Their telepathic nature made them think more and more alike. Innovation slowed. They became powerful but also rigid. Most species follow this pattern, Vexthara explained as the visions continued. They develop technology, explore space, build empires. But eventually, they reach a point where they stop growing. They become locked into their way of thinking. Marcus saw other civilizations, some that had lasted thousands of years without any real change. Others that had destroyed themselves because they could not adapt to new challenges. But humans are different, she continued. Your minds work in ways that allow constant change. You can completely reshape how you think about problems. You can understand viewpoints that are totally alien to your own experience. The visions changed to show human history. Marcus saw his own species learning to work together despite vast differences in culture, language, and beliefs. He saw humans reaching out to alien species, not to conquer, but to understand. Most telepathic species think alike because their minds are connected, Vexthara explained. Most non-telepathic species develop rigid thinking patterns that help them survive. But humans develop something unique, the ability to be individuals while still working together, to change while staying true to core values. Marcus felt the connection fade as she removed her hand from his forehead. You think we can help solve problems that other species cannot. I know you can, she said firmly, but others do not see it yet. They see only a young species that has barely left their home world. As if her words had summoned it, Marcus's communication device began flashing with urgent messages. He picked it up and his face went pale. What is it? Vexthara asked. The Hegemony Coalition, Marcus said, reading quickly. They are calling for an emergency assembly. They want to challenge the legitimacy of my claiming. The Hegemony Coalition was a group of older, aggressive species that had been unhappy with Zephyrian dominance for centuries. They controlled about a sixth of the galaxy and had always resented taking orders from anyone. Lord Thakmur of the Draknari is leading the challenge, Marcus continued reading. He says that claiming a primitive species as equals undermines the entire galactic order. Queen Vexthara's patterns began moving faster, which Marcus now knew meant she was thinking hard or becoming angry. Thakmur has been looking for an excuse to challenge our authority for decades. Now he thinks he has found one. What does this mean? Marcus asked. It means that in 3 days, you will face the challenge of minds, she replied. Ancient galactic law allows any being to challenge a royal claiming if they believe it was made in error. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What exactly is a challenge of minds? A formal test to prove that you are worthy of the position I have given you, Vexthara said. Traditionally, it involves mental combat between telepathic beings. The stronger mind wins. But I am not telepathic, Marcus pointed out. No, she agreed. Which is why Thakmur thinks he has already won. Her expression shifted to something that might have been a smile. He's about to learn why I chose you. Over the next 2 days, Marcus learned more about galactic politics than he had ever wanted to know. The Hegemony Coalition was spreading messages across space, claiming that the Zephyrian Empire was weak and confused. They said that elevating a human proved that Queen Vexthara was no longer fit to rule such a vast territory. Some species were listening to these messages. The Kravani Republic was staying neutral, but other smaller nations were starting to question their alliances. A few had even begun moving their trade fleets away from Zephyrian space. They are trying to start a war, Ambassador Rodriguez told Marcus during a private meeting. If enough species believe that the Empire is weak, they might join the coalition in challenging Zephyrian control. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. So not only do I have to prove I am worthy of being co-emperor, I have to do it in a way that prevents a galactic war. That sums it up pretty well, Rodriguez said grimly. That evening, Marcus found Queen Vexthara in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The space around them was filled with ships, Zephyrian vessels, but also ships from dozens of other species who had come to witness the challenge. Having second thoughts about your choice? Marcus asked, joining her at the great window. Never, she said without hesitation. But I am concerned about the burden I have placed on you. Marcus looked out at the assembled fleets. Each ship represented thousands or millions of beings whose lives would be affected by what happened tomorrow. You really believe humans can make a difference in how this galaxy works? I believe you can, she replied. Tomorrow, you will face minds that have been thinking the same way for thousands of years. They expect you to try to match their telepathic power, to fight them on their terms, and instead, Queen Vexthara turned to look at him directly. Instead, you will do what humans do best. You will think of something no one else has thought of. You will find a solution that no one else can see. You will prove that different does not mean lesser. Marcus nodded slowly. No pressure or anything. This time she definitely smiled. Oh, there is enormous pressure. The future of multiple civilizations depends on what happens tomorrow. But I have seen into your mind, Marcus-chan. I know what you are capable of, even if you do not know it yet. As Marcus looked out at the ships gathering for tomorrow's challenge, he thought about everything that had led to this moment. A week ago, he had been just another diplomat trying to do his job. Now he was about to determine the future of galactic politics. But Queen Vexthara was right about one thing. Humans were different. Maybe that difference was exactly what the galaxy needed. He just hoped he would not let everyone down when the time came to prove it. The challenge arena was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Built into the center of the massive diplomatic station, it was a sphere of pure crystal floating in space. Inside, representatives from all major galactic civilizations sat in tiers that rose up like a giant amphitheater. Marcus stood in the center, feeling very small under the gaze of thousands of alien beings. Across from him stood Lord Takmur of the Draknori, a creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and a giant insect. His scales were dark red, and his forearms each ended in claws that could probably cut through steel behind. Takmur stood three other coalition leaders. General Krex of the Vorthan military, Ambassador Sultan of the Nexari Trade Federation, and Counselor Yixara of the Hegemony Worlds. Each represented billions of beings who believed humans had no place in galactic leadership. Queen Vexthara sat in the royal observation box, surrounded by Zephyrian nobles. Her face showed no emotion, but Marcus could feel her mind touching his gently, offering support without interfering. The challenge of minds will proceed in 3 parts, announced Elder Korvash, an ancient being who served as neutral judge. First, the trial of mental strength. Second, the test of wisdom. Third, the proof of leadership. Marcus-chan of Earth, do you accept this challenge? Marcus took a deep breath. I accept. Thugmur's laugh was like grinding metal. This will be brief. A telepathic mind that has lived for 1,500 years against a primitive creature barely out of the trees. The first trial began immediately. Thugmur's mental attack hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. The Dragnari Lord was trying to overwhelm his mind with pure psychic force, to break his will and leave him helpless on the arena floor. For a moment, Marcus staggered. The attack was stronger than anything he had ever experienced. But then something strange happened. Instead of trying to match Thakmer's power, Marcus did something the Draknari had not expected. He started thinking about music, not just any music, but a complex piece from Earth that layered dozens of different melodies together. Then he added mathematics, visualizing equations that described how stars formed. Then he thought about the taste of his grandmother's cooking, the feeling of rain on his face, and the way children laughed in playgrounds. Thakmer's attack faltered. The Draknari Lord had never encountered a mind that could think about so many different things at the same time. His telepathic assault, designed to overwhelm a single focused thought pattern, scattered against Marcus's chaotic but organized mental activity like water hitting a spinning wheel. Impossible, Thakmer growled. Focus your mind, human. Fight me properly. But Marcus had realized something important. He did not need to match Thakmer's telepathic strength. He just needed to be so completely human that the alien's mental attack could not find anything to grip. He thought about every human he had ever met, every story he had ever heard, every emotion he had ever felt. His mind became a symphony of human experience, too complex and varied for any single telepathic probe to understand or control. Thakmer's second attack was stronger, but it had the same result. The Draknari's focused mental force could not penetrate the beautiful chaos of human thought. After 10 minutes, Thakmer stopped his attacks, breathing heavily. This proves nothing. Your mind is simply too primitive to be controlled properly. Elder Korvash raised one tentacle. The trial of mental strength is complete. Marcus Chen has successfully defended against telepathic assault. We proceed to the test of wisdom. For this trial, the 4 coalition leaders presented Marcus with a series of problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Trade disputes between incompatible species, territorial conflicts that had lasted for generations, and resource shortages that seemed impossible to solve. Marcus listened to each problem carefully. The coalition leaders were confident he would fail. These were issues that the smartest minds in the galaxy had been unable to resolve. But as Marcus listened, he began to see something the others had missed. Each problem was being approached as if there was only one right answer, one solution that would work for everyone. The different species kept trying to find compromise positions that made everyone equally unhappy. What if we stopped looking for single solutions? Marcus said finally. What if each problem could have multiple solutions that worked differently for different species? General Krex scoffed. That is chaos. There must be order, consistency, unified law. Why? Marcus asked. Why must every species follow exactly the same rules? Why must every solution work the same way for everyone? He walked to the center of the arena and began explaining his ideas. For the trade dispute, instead of trying to force incompatible species to use the same economic system, why not create multiple systems that could interact with each other? For territorial conflicts, instead of rigid borders, why not flexible zones that changed based on seasonal needs or population shifts? You propose anarchy, Ambassador Sultan protested. I propose diversity, Marcus replied. On Earth, we have hundreds of different cultures, languages, and ways of life. They do not all have to be the same to work together. We have learned to celebrate our differences instead of trying to eliminate them. The audience began murmuring. Some species were intrigued by these ideas. Others seemed horrified by the concept of multiple solutions to the same problem. Counselor Yuxara stepped forward. Even if your ideas had merit, they require a level of cooperation that has never existed in galactic politics. How would you convince 800 different species to try such radical changes? This brought them to the third trial. The proof of leadership. Marcus looked around the arena at all the different beings watching him. Some were humanoid, others were completely alien. Some breathed oxygen, others required methane or liquid ammonia. Some thought as individuals, others as hive minds. I would not convince them, he said finally. I would ask them to convince me. The coalition leaders looked confused, but Marcus continued. The problem with galactic leadership is that it always flows from the top down. Powerful species make decisions and force weaker ones to follow. But what if leadership meant listening instead of commanding? He turned to address the entire assembly. Every species here has solved problems that others have not. Every culture has developed wisdom that could help others. Instead of one empire ruling over everyone, what if we created a system where everyone could teach and learn from each other? Queen Vestara was leaning forward in her seat, her patterns moving rapidly with interest. The human approach, Marcus continued, is not to have all the answers. It is to ask better questions. Instead of, how do we make everyone obey the same laws? We ask, how do we help everyone find laws that work for them? Instead of, how do we control the galaxy? We ask, how do we help the galaxy govern itself? Tuckmer was growing angrier. Pretty words, but you offer no concrete solutions. How would this fantasy system actually work? Marcus smiled. The same way humans learn to work together despite our differences. We start small. We pick one problem, one region, one group of species willing to try something new. We experiment. We learn. We adapt. And when others see that it works, they choose to join us. And if some species refuse to cooperate, General Krex demanded. Then we continue working with those who do, Marcus replied. We do not force anyone to change, but we show them a better way exists. Most beings want peace, prosperity, and the chance to grow. If we can offer that more effectively than the current system, they will choose to be part of it. Elder Corvash raised his tentacles for silence. The trials are complete. The challenger has failed to prove the claiming invalid. Marcus Chen has demonstrated mental resilience, innovative thinking, and a leadership philosophy that offers new approaches to old problems. Thekmer roared his anger. This proves nothing. He has not solved anything. He has only offered empty promises. But around the arena, Marcus could see that many representatives were thinking hard about what he had said. Some were already talking quietly among themselves, discussing the possibilities. Queen Vexthara stood up in her observation box. The challenge of minds is complete. Marcus Chen has proven himself worthy of his position. But more than that, he has shown us a new way forward. She looked directly at the coalition leaders. You came here expecting to find weakness. Instead, you have witnessed the birth of a new age in galactic politics. An age where cooperation replaces domination. Where diversity is celebrated rather than suppressed. Thukmer and his allies were clearly furious, but they could not challenge the formal results of the trials. Marcus had met every test they had set for him, and he had done it without violence or force thought as the arena began to empty. Species representatives were clustering together in small groups, discussing what they had heard. Some seemed excited by the possibilities Marcus had described. Others were skeptical but curious. Queen Vexthara approached Marcus, her expression proud. You have done something remarkable here today. You have given the galaxy hope for something better. Marcus looked around at all the beings who were talking, planning, wondering if change was really possible. I hope I can live up to what I promised them. You already have, she replied, by showing them that different does not mean inferior. By proving that new ideas can solve old problems. By being exactly what humanity is, adaptable, creative, and determined to find a better way. As they walked, 5 years had passed since the challenge of minds, and Marcus Chen stood once again in a great assembly hall. But this time, everything was different. The confluence center orbited Earth's moon, built jointly by 37 different species who had volunteered to try the new approach to galactic governance. Instead of one massive hall with a single throne, the center had dozens of smaller meeting spaces, each designed for different types of beings and different kinds of discussions. Marcus walked through the main corridor, nodding to representatives from across the galaxy. There was Ambassador Kethara of the Solari, whose species breathed methane and lived in specially designed chambers. She waved one of her tentacles in greeting as she floated past in her mobile environment suit. Further down the hall, he saw a group of young Zephyrians working with human engineers on a new translation system. The project was led by Vexthera's nephew, who had become fascinated by human approaches to communication after studying Earth's many languages. "Marcus," called a familiar voice. He turned to see Dr. Sarah Okafor, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, approaching with a datapad in her hands. "You need to see the latest results from the Corvani experiment." Marcus smiled. Dr. Okafor had been one of the first humans to volunteer for the new diplomatic course, and her work had been crucial in developing the flexible governance systems they now used. "Good news?" he asked, looking at the data. "Better than good," she replied, excitement clear in her voice. "The Corvani Republic has officially voted to adopt our cooperative model for their entire trade network. They are the 15th major power to make the switch." It had not been easy. The first year after the challenge had been full of skepticism and resistance. Many species had been afraid to try something so different from the traditional empire-based systems that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. But Queen Vexthara had kept her word. She had gradually transferred power from the Zephyrian Empire to the new Confluence Council, a body where every member species had an equal voice regardless of their size or military strength. The key breakthrough had come when the mining dispute between the Hexery and the Vorthan had been resolved using Marcus's approach. Instead of forcing one side to submit to the other, they had found a solution that gave both species what they truly needed. The Hexery got access to rare minerals, while the Vorthan got protection for their sacred sites. Most importantly, both sides had helped design the agreement. Word of that success had spread quickly. Other species had started asking for help with their own disputes. Each time, the Confluence Council had approached the problem by asking all parties what they really needed, then working together to find creative solutions. "Marcus, there you are." Queen Vexthara appeared beside him with that silent grace that still amazed him. She wore simpler robes now, and her royal patterns had been modified to include flowing designs that represented the many species they worked with. "Vex," Marcus said, using the informal name she had asked him to adopt years ago. "Sarah was just telling me about the Corvani decision." "I heard," Vexthara replied, her expression pleased. "And I have more good news. The Hegemony Coalition has formally requested mediation for their border disputes with the Outer Rim territories." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Thukmar agreed to that?" "Thukmar is no longer in power," Vexthara said. "He was replaced by someone more interested in practical solutions than ancient grudges. It seems that watching 15 major powers prosper under our new system has changed many minds." They walked together toward the main meeting chamber, where the weekly Confluence session was about to begin. As they moved through the corridors, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The old galactic order had been based on power and fear. Strong species dominated weak ones, and conflicts were resolved through military force or economic pressure. It had been stable in its way, but it had also been rigid and often cruel. The new system was messier, more complicated, and required constant communication and compromise. But it was also more creative, more adaptable, and much more fair. Species that had been ignored for centuries now had voices in galactic affairs. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were being resolved through cooperation and innovation. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Marcus asked Vexthara as they paused outside the meeting chamber. when you ruled an empire instead of facilitating discussions between hundreds of different governments? Vexthara considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity, she admitted. Making decisions alone was easier than building consensus among dozens of species. But I do not miss the loneliness, or the weight of making choices that affected billions of beings without their input. She turned to look at him directly. You taught me something important, Marcus. True strength is not the power to control others. It is the wisdom to help others control themselves. The meeting chamber was already full when they entered. Representatives from 43 different species were present, either in person or through advanced communication links. The chamber itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with environmental controls that allowed each species to be comfortable while still being able to interact with others. Today's session was focused on a problem that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago: planning the first truly interspecies colonial expedition. A new star system had been discovered with 3 habitable planets, each suitable for different types of life. Instead of fighting over who got to claim it, 12 different species were working together to establish shared colonies. Marcus took his seat at the facilitator's table. Unlike the old royal thrones, this was a simple circular table where he sat as an equal among equals. His role was not to make decisions for others, but to help them make decisions together. Before we begin today's discussions, Marcus said, addressing the assembly, I want to share some thoughts about how far we have come. The chamber quieted as representatives turned their attention to him. 5 years ago, many of you thought the ideas we proposed were impossible dreams: cooperation between natural enemies, shared resources instead of territorial claims, governance based on consensus instead of force. He looked around the room at the diverse collection of beings who were now working together daily. You proved that those dreams were not impossible. You proved that beings from completely different worlds, with completely different ways of thinking, could find common ground when they chose to look for it. There were sounds of agreement from around the chamber, clicks, whistles, musical tones, and mental harmonics from the telepathic species. Today, we are planning colonies where multiple species will live and work together as partners. Our children will grow up knowing that diversity is a source of strength, not a cause for conflict. They will solve problems we cannot even imagine. Yet, because they will think in ways that combine the wisdom of dozens of different civilizations. Marcus paused, thinking of Earth and the long journey that had brought humanity to this moment. Humans have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We have learned that it takes a galaxy to raise a civilization. Not one species ruling over others, but all species learning from each other. After the session ended, Marcus found himself alone in the chamber, looking out at the stars through the great observation windows. So many worlds out there, so many possibilities for growth and discovery. Thinking deep thoughts? Vexthara asked, joining him at the window. Thinking about the future, Marcus replied. About what the galaxy will look like in another 5 years, another 50 years. What do you see? Marcus smiled. I see humans learning from Zephyrian wisdom about long-term thinking. I see Zephyrians learning from human adaptability. I see all of our species becoming more than they were before, because they chose to grow together instead of apart. Vexthara moved closer to him, and he felt the familiar warmth of her mind touching his. Over the years, their partnership had grown into something deeper. Not just political allies, but true partners in every sense. The Marcus Chen Institute for Interspecies Understanding received its latest enrollment numbers, she told him. 2,000 new students from 38 different species, all coming to learn diplomatic methods based on cooperation instead of domination. The institute had been Marcus's idea, but it had grown far beyond anything he had originally envisioned. Students came from across the galaxy to study not just human diplomatic techniques, but the integration of wisdom from dozens of different civilizations. Graduates of the program were now serving as mediators, researchers, and leaders on hundreds of worlds. "Do you think we have really changed things?" Marcus asked. "Or are we just a brief experiment that will be forgotten when the next crisis?" "Commies?" Vexthera was quiet for a moment, her patterns moving in the slow, thoughtful rhythm he had learned to recognize. "Change is never permanent," she said finally. "Each generation must choose again whether to cooperate or compete, whether to build bridges or walls. But you have given them tools to make better choices. You have shown them that another way is possible." She gestured toward the window, where ships from dozens of different species were moving peacefully through space, carrying goods, people, and ideas between worlds that had once been enemies.